All right, great. So without further ado, recording, and we are going to talk about the process of applying to college. Okay. All right, so hopefully everyone can see my screen.
It's not necessary.
All right, and we already covered this, so we can move right on. Okay, so just to start by having you guys think a little bit about what it means to you to have to either be on the verge of applying to college or to have a child or a grandchild or a niece or nephew who's on the verge of applying to college. So I just want you to think about something that might be exciting about this for you and your family, something that might be scary about this for you and your family, and a question that you have about the process, something that you're hoping that gets answered tonight. And if you would be willing to share one of the things that you write down in the chat bar, it would be great to see kind of like what people's fears and excitements are, and or what questions you all have. And while you're doing that, I'm going to proceed to the next slide. So my goal tonight, sort of like the guiding question that I thought about when I thought what I wanted to share with you is, what is going to be in store for your children as they prepare to apply to college, and what you as parents can do to support them in that process. So that's what this whole presentation is going to be about. And we're going to cover a lot of ground. We're going to be talking about the components of a college application. So what are all of the parts that go into applying to college, and what is it that your students are going to be working on? What resources are available as support for you and for them? What kind of timeline are they going to be looking at? And then we're going to briefly talk about financial aid. I know that is something that parents are often, that often is the part of the application process that parents are the most involved in and have the most questions about. So I am going to make sure that we touch on that today as well. Okay, in the MailChimp, well, you probably are not even aware of what MailChimp is. It's the website that we use to blast out emails. So in the email that you received notifying you about college night, there were some materials that were linked in there, and I don't know if anyone had a chance to look them over, but I'm just going to ask like how many people had a chance to take a glance at the materials before you joined tonight. No pressure, just want to see who had a chance to look. And then for anyone who did, if you would be willing to share what was available to you in the materials. And then that's available for you guys to go and look at a later date. Anyone who had a chance to preview the materials, willing to just share some of the things that were available to you? Call on Terry.
This is Joe's mom.
Thank you.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Thank you for volunteering to share.
You gave example of essay. You gave a lot of different topics, like to write about a personal experience, to write about how it affected you, or to write about a goal you achieved and what you had to do to obtain it, etc. You also gave us a format of sort of like a to-do list, like what we need to have to fill out the applications, like what necessary information we should have from ahead of time, because they're going to be asking for like the school code, etc. I can't remember everything, but that's what I remember so far, Miss.
That's okay. I'm like, I didn't mean to frame
Joseph
it as
is gonna kill me.
I didn't want to frame it as a test for anybody. I just wanted, first of all, I just wanted to take a break from talking and have someone else share, and just like, allow parents to be engaged, because that's the goal of having you all here. So there are, so no pressure. I'm just going to sort of like give a quick glance into the folders, and I'm not going to go through all the materials with you, but I just want you to know that linked in that email are a bunch of materials that, I hope you'll find helpful at some point in the process. And really what I wanted to do is expose families to like all of the different pieces of work that your student is going to have to do as they apply to college. Because I do think one of the biggest ways in which parents can support is to kind of be in the know about what's happening. so that you can ask your student about it and you can have conversations about it. And the best way for you all to feel equipped to do that is to know what they're going through. So I just wanted to share materials that would give you a preview about what to expect and what goes into the college application. So within the folders that you received, there's information about the college essay, as you mentioned. There's a copy of the first year application, or at least an application that's known as the Common App. So if you want to see what kinds of questions come up on a college application, that's there for you. There's a sample letter of recommendation so that you could see what something like that might look like. A checklist of materials to gather. So there's a lot of resources available to you. And when you get the time, you know, those folders are there and they're going to stay there. So whenever you do have the time to look it over, that's available to you. The other thing that families ask for a lot that I want to make you aware of is, so this is also something that you have access to, but helpful websites. So a lot of times parents will ask for resources to search for scholarships or resources to do college searches. So all of that is in the helpful websites document that's also been provided to you. And all the websites that I mentioned tonight are listed here. So all of the resources are available. I also created a Mel's College Office website that contains a lot of the same information. So I'm not going to go through the website with you. I just want you to know that it exists. It's new as of last year when COVID hit and we went remote. We wanted to make sure that families had access to all of this information in one place. And so this website is new within the last year. And I wanted to let everyone know that it existed as a resource for you. All right, so I will go back to the presentation. Okay, so I'm going to start out with the first thing on the agenda, which is the parts of a college application. So first of all, students they cannot apply to college. This is a question that comes often. Like, when should my child start applying to college? And the answer about like physically filling out and submitting applications is that they will not be able to do that until August at the earliest. That's when the application turns over from the current graduating class to be available to the next year's graduating class. But the process of applying is something that goes on throughout their high school experience. And students are actually in their junior year working on a number of components of their college application in their school experience. When students apply, the application is only one piece of what gets submitted to schools. All of the things on this list also need to be submitted to colleges. So you have the application itself that usually contains demographic information about the student, their name, their address, their social security number. Sometimes they'll ask questions about the family and who's in the household. But that's kind of like the application itself tends to be largely demographic information. In addition to that, not 100% of colleges, but I would say the majority of them want to receive an essay or something that's called a personal statement. And we'll delve into that a little bit more in a minute. Colleges often also require a letter of recommendation, and generally speaking, that comes from a teacher who has had them in class, and that's an opportunity for the school to learn a little bit about what that student is like to teach. A resume or activities list that shows what a student has been involved in or engaged in besides the time that they spend in the classroom. Test scores if required. If you joined me earlier this year, I did like a sort of in-depth presentation on SAT and ACT scores. And we talked a lot about testing optional. I will touch on that again tonight. But when we say test scores here, we're referring to things like SATs or ACTs, so standardized college entrance tests. The transcript is a big part of the college application. That's the document that shows all of the classes that students have taken from 9th grade through the end of 11th grade and all of the grades they've earned in those classes. And then lastly, the fee or the fee waiver. So colleges, and again, not 100% of, but many colleges charge a fee to apply. That fee is kept by the college regardless of whether the student is admitted or not. And that basically is something that schools do to ensure that like students are serious when they apply, that they're investing their time and money in applying because they're truly interested in the school, because it does take resources. The college has to invest resources in having all of the applications read. However, if a household has financial need, there are fee waivers available. I have not been in a position where a student has not been able to apply to college because of costs, because when costs are a concern, there's always waivers or ways of covering it. So applying to college is affordable and attending college is affordable too. And I'll touch on that again when we talk about financial aid. So that's just an overview of the parts of a college application. Now, Joe's mom had mentioned before that there was a sample college essay in the materials. And this is not what I'm trying to do. The reason is that I wanted everyone just to get a sense of what the college essay entails. Students are all going to be writing something that's personal and unique to them, but I just wanted people to get a feel for what a college essay was all about. And this way you can have conversations with your student, like, what are you writing about? And sometimes even parents can support with doing the brainstorming around that. So it didn't look like a lot of people had a chance to preview the materials. So I'm just going to take a minute and let people take a quick glance at this very small excerpt from a college essay, just to give you a sense of what it might contain. And you'll notice that this is a personal essay and it says something about this particular student and their experience in life. So if you are interested in seeing the full essay, that's available to you in the parent materials. And there are also a lot of essays that are available online. I'm going to be talking about what your students are working on this year, but the college essay is one of the things that they're working on. They actually just started this unit in their junior year English classes. So, it's something that you can ask your student about. And maybe even talk to them about what they're going to choose to write about. I know that can be a struggle for a lot of students to figure this piece out. This is an excerpt from a letter of recommendation. This was not written for a MELS student, and it was not written by a MELS teacher. But again, I included it because your students, particularly your juniors, engaged in an activity in their crew where they thought through which staff members at MELS they thought would make a good recommender for them. Or who could act as a champion for them. And so they just made that request recently, and they are going to be writing a brag sheet where they have the opportunity to, say all sorts of great things about themselves and share projects that they've worked really hard on and aspects of their character so that their teachers can use that feedback in preparing a letter of rec for them. So our students are going to walk away with their own letter of recommendation that will be sent to the schools they apply to. And this sort of pertains to the timeline. So this is often really important. What are students working on in their junior year? What's really important for them to complete? And what are they going to be working on next year? So you can see that actually a lot of the tasks live here in the junior year. So here are some of the things that we are hoping and expecting juniors will do. And in doing all of these things, it will help them be better prepared when they are seniors. And for any parents in the audience who are parents of 10th graders, this kind of gives you a preview of what your student will be doing next year. And if they want to be working on any of this in their sophomore year, certainly researching colleges is something that does not need to wait until junior year. But in junior year, students are requesting a letter of rec from a MELS teacher. I just mentioned that that's a process that we walk them through in crew. And so they just completed making that request. At the beginning of June, they're going to be finding out which teacher they have been assigned to, and they're going to be expected to provide that teacher with a structured brag sheet, which they are also going to be working on in crew. So there are supports in place to make that happen. Students are going to be writing their college essay, or they're going to at least be exposed to what it is like to write a college essay. So they're doing that currently in their English class with Miss Ellis. They just started that unit. She does brainstorming work with the students. Then they will write a draft and she will take them through the editing and revision process. They do not have to use that when they apply to college if they decide that they would like to write something else. Certainly they're welcome to do it, but the goal of the activity is to introduce students to this kind of personal writing that is often very different from academic writing. And we want to equip students with the tools to write a sort of like successful and effective college essay. So that is happening right now. taking the SAT, usually students do that for the first time in their junior year. We did have school test day. I know that there were a number of students and families who chose not to participate in that, which is fine. Last year when COVID first hit, a lot of the tests were canceled. And students really were unable to test from April all the way through September. And then when they opened test sites back up, it was with like reduced capacity. And so it was challenging for students to take SATs last year. I certainly think that it has gotten easier. And so my guess is that we're going to see the number of students who take standardized tests increase. But students are also having like a very challenging school year. I think remote learning has been different. For some students, it's been great. For some students, it's been a struggle. But the world has not returned to normal yet, and colleges recognize that. Almost every college last year decided that they were going to be testing optional, which means if you take the SATs and you are happy with your scores, that you can send them and they will be looked at. And if you don't take the SATs, or you take them but you choose not to submit your score, that's okay too. And they will review your application without test scores. So that's basically been the decision that colleges have made. And we are seeing, so far what I'm seeing is that colleges are continuing that trend into next year. So for the class of 2022, I expect that they will be able to choose to be a testing optional applicant if they want. That being said, though, if students are going to take the SATs, often their junior year is when they will test for the first time. So that's another part of their college applications that they're already working on as juniors. They've been writing and revising resumes at different touch points throughout the year. So they did it sort of like worked on a draft of a resume earlier this year. I think that they're going to be doing some revisions in Crew in the near future. Transcript development, what I mean by that is working on getting sort of like the strongest grades that you're able to get for all the juniors in the house when you do apply to college and I send your transcript. That transcript is going to include everything 9th through the end of 11th grade. Eventually, I will have to send what's known as a mid-year report, and that will contain first semester grades from your senior year. But some colleges will already have reviewed your application at that time. So this current semester that we're in right now is that last glimpse of your academics that colleges are going to get. So right now, one of your primary focuses is getting the strongest grades that you can and developing your transcript as best as you can. Another thing that we ask juniors to start doing is gathering financial documents and getting their paperwork in order. This is largely a parent task. So what is going to happen is that next year, after October 1st, financial aid applications are going to open. If you have a junior, that's the class of 2022, they're going to be applying for federal aid for 22-23, and you're going to be using your 2020 tax documents. So the documents that you just prepared, or if you got an extension or working on preparing right now, those are the financial documents that are going to be used when you apply for financial aid for your child. So making sure that you know where those are, that you store them in a place that you can, have access to them next year. If you're a non-tax filer, but you have other documentation, like any SSA or any other kinds of support, just making sure that you have all of that in a place that's going to be accessible because you will need it next year. And then lastly, research in colleges. I know it's been difficult for people to get on campus. Colleges are opening up again for people to come and visit. But for families who are unable to go for a variety of reasons or who feel unsafe going, there are also a lot of virtual tours, open house events, and opportunities to tour campuses online. So using various online platforms to get a sense of which schools might be a good fit and writing a preliminary list of colleges of interest. All of these things are junior year tasks. So you can see that it's quite a workload for students in their junior year. And I know junior year is already a big workload with all of the classes that students are taking. And then in students' senior year, they may take the SAT a second time. I will be working with them to make a final list of colleges to apply to. The preliminary list, we expect that to be either much smaller than it needs to be, and then we want to add some schools to it, or it's much larger than it needs to be, and we want to reduce it. So in students' senior year, they should be making final decisions about where to apply. Some schools require supplemental essays, so if they need to rate anything in addition to the main essay, Usually that happens in senior year. And that's when they're actually filling out and submitting applications and paying fee waivers. And like I said before, applying for financial aid. So that just gives you sort of a flavor of what happens in junior year versus senior year and what the timeline for some of these things are. So I'm just going to take a pause and see where people are at with knowing and understanding this information. So if you could take a moment to just drop into the chat bar, 1, if this information is totally new for you, 2, if you knew some of this, but some of it is new, and 3, if you have a good sense of what it means to apply to college, but are learning about the MELS process for the first time. And I guess if you're a repeat parent who has had children go through this process at MELS before, you can put a 4 in the chat bar, like you know about it and you know about how it functions at MELS. And I have a parent of an alumni who's here to join us and give some insight into what it was like to be a parent of a senior and some of the ways that they supported their student. So I'm going to stop talking for a couple of minutes and I'm going to turn it over to Jackie Estacio, whose daughter is about to graduate from college.
Hi everyone. Thank you for inviting me to chat with you guys. Well, I'm Jackie Estacio Gabrielle. I was one of the PTA co-presidents with Bethany Thomas, who has Gemma, who is graduating this year. As Ms. Bensley said, Gabrielle went to Wheaton College and she will be graduating on Saturday. And the process of figuring out school and all the applications, she did most of it on her own with the help of Ms. Bensley. And I was definitely able to assist with the financial part of the application. So that's definitely important to keep track of. And just, so, you know, I guess don't procrastinate is one of the things that I would say. And just make sure that you have all your paperwork and your child has everything that they need to be able to provide. I know that essay does take a while. What can I tell you? Gabrielle is on a pre-med track, and she will be graduating with a minor in Russian and a major in neuroscience. And hopefully one day she is aspiring to be a MD-DO. So that's very exciting. It was a little nerve-wracking day for me today because she drove to Wheaton on her own after a friend kind of like couldn't make it. So I can breathe because she arrived there at 4 o'clock and now she's, you know, ready for whatever festivities they have for this week for them. I guess what can I, the applications, like I said, she did on her own. The one thing that I would just say to support your child is be there to answer whatever questions and start prepping them to kind of like live on their own sooner than later, you know. So this way they can really feel that they're making it on their own. It is very scary in the very beginning, but I guess you'll get calls and just be there, listen to them. And she was able, one of the fun things that she did while she was at Wheaton was that she had an opportunity to study abroad, which was a fabulous experience. She went to Copenhagen in Denmark and she did some traveling on her own. So with her flatmates, she was there for about almost 3 months and she traveled just about every other weekend. And that definitely made her more independent. MELS does prepare them to advocate for themselves. And this was definitely a plus. And one day she'll come back and talk to hopefully the seniors as at MELS. What else can I say?
I was just going to ask, because you had mentioned that Gabby did a lot of the work on her own,
Mhm.
which she did. And I think different students are in different spaces with this. So we do have a lot of students who do a lot of the application work on their own or with support from the school. And next year, students will be working on, like, they'll have some time and space to work on applications, during their time at school. But it's
Mhm.
always more work than what we can devote because we can't have them missing too many classes, right? So it's always a
Exactly.
balancing act. But how did you communicate? Because I do find sometimes that's a challenge when the student is doing the work and the parent wants to know what's happening. So, how did you guys communicate about what she was doing and what you were doing and what were some of the
Um,
challenges?
well, she would definitely keep me in the loop. Um, Whatever she needed, whether it was paperwork, passwords, and we basically kept them all on one sheet. So this way, if I was working and I couldn't get to her, she knew all the passwords that she needed to be able to access anything online that she needed. And we had hard copies of paperwork as well. And just kind of like talking about it, like she kept me informed on just about everything that she was doing. So, but like you said, everybody's busy and um, different, different learning styles, I guess, as well. Um, but just being, able to talk about it all the time is one of the key things I would say. And once you're in school, once they apply and get into a school, it's just make sure that they add you to the list, their email, um, that their new school will send out, because a lot of parents just want to know, just to know, because they won't talk to you after your child is a freshman in college. Basically, they call you only for the money. Other than that, the kids have to be accountable for their schoolwork and getting on time. So start preparing them as of now too.
Thank you. Um, I want to allow some time for parents to ask questions, of you as a parent and things that I can't necessarily answer. I mean, you have a daughter who
Mhm.
left the house and went away. So if anyone has any questions about what that felt like, or any
Right.
questions for Mrs. Stassi, I'm gonna give a couple of minutes for that. Feel free to just ask, or if you drop it in the chat bar, I can always ask.
Okay.
Not seeing questions come up, but we are
Okay.
going to talk. We're going to talk a little bit about the in terms of support and what families can do. That I do. Richard, do you have your hand raised?
Yeah, I'm a student, but wondering since your daughter, you said that she went out of the country for college?
She went, no, she studied at Wheaton, which is in Norton, Massachusetts,
Mm-hmm.
but she got to, in her last year, which was her junior year, she was able to travel to Denmark. And that was part of the study abroad program, which she really wanted to do. And she basically did a semester in Denmark. Um, and it was a great experience. She got to meet um, some great friends that they still keep in touch. The only thing was that they were able to come back early because of COVID. But if you have an opportunity to go to study abroad for a semester, definitely encourage your child or the students should want to go. Should
Yeah,
definitely try it.
yeah, that's so cool, and that you were open to allowing her to be independent and kind of go out of state and even out of the country. Like,
Mhm.
my question is about because I'm a student, any advice that you have about how I can talk to my own parent about leaving the state or going further from home for college. So how would I communicate with my parents?
Um, well, I think if you're independent and you're really excited about going away, I think definitely Mel's teaches you to advocate for yourself.
Mhm.
So definitely advocate for what is important, that you do want to go away and you want to experience the new, um, a, a new college, a new place, you know. What else can I tell you? And, obviously traveling, it is nerve wracking um, for a parent and for a child as well. And know that your parents will always, have your back. Just, call them. You might, be more surprised, you'll be pleasantly surprised that they'll just say, okay, it's a good experience.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Good luck.
Anyone else? Anyone have any specific questions for just from parent perspective? All right. I don't know, Jackie, I don't know if you wanna, I'm gonna get at some point to
I'll stay in.
yeah, okay, so I'll get to some point at what parents can do to support, and if you have any feedback or you wanna jump in, you're always welcome
Sure.
to do that, and
No problem.
thank you so much.
Nice seeing you. Thank you.
Nice seeing you too. I told you I'm so proud of Gabby. All right, I'm gonna go back to the presentation. Sorry, my technical skills are, it's the end of a long day here. Okay, great. So I want to talk a little bit more about the support that's going to be available at Mel's. I think I'll just gloss over the things that we already covered, but they're the letter of recommendation support that exists in the form of helping students to think through who they might want to ask and creating time and space for them to prepare their brag sheet. The resume writing, like I said, we do some work with students through Crew to help them prepare something that they could then later use for the activities section of their college application. Also, the resume is valuable for them if they are applying for any jobs or internship opportunities this summer. We're providing support with writing the personal statement or the college essay. SATs, we had school test day, so a lot of this is already underway. College list making, this is something that comes up pretty frequently. So the list making is kind of like a 2 or a 3-way street, right? So like I absolutely am available to help students with this list making piece. And there are things that I know, just having done this with students for the last 10 years or so, that students don't necessarily have access to. Like which colleges are financially generous and what I predict financial aid might look like at this institution. And what kind of student some of these colleges have admitted in the past, and helping students think about what a safety target in Reed School might look like for them. So that's a big part of the work that I do with students. And I always do that in individual, like that's an individual meeting that I will have with students. I'm going to start to do junior meetings in the next week or so. And there is some information that I need from the student and the family to be able to provide the most accurate support. What different students and families want and need from a college is going to look very different from person to person. So I will get to this at the end of my presentation, but there are 3 forms that I'm going to be sending out to juniors and asking them to complete. One is just an information form trying to get a better sense of what the student is looking for from their college experience or their post-secondary experience for students who are not necessarily planning to go to college. The second form is me wanting to get some input from families, because this is usually a collaborative process. Students have certain things that they want, families have certain things that they want for their student, or certain things that they expect or require. So I like to get input from both the student and the family. And then the third piece of information that I'm going to ask for, and of course all of this is voluntary, it's not required, but some financial information is really helpful to me in being able to help students make the most accurate list possible, because different colleges are going to come back with different costs, and some of that is dependent on what the need in the household looks like. Some schools provide full need-based aid for household incomes that fall below a certain threshold. So for me to be able to make really sort of careful and considered suggestions that match what you need as a family and as a student, I need some information from you. So I'm going to be sending those forms out and asking families to complete them. And that allows me to provide the most accurate possible list making support that I can. And I will work with students. I'll do individual meetings with everybody, either in the spring of their junior year or the very beginning of fall of their senior year. College application support, what I have always done is work with students in workshops and groups during their senior year. I always pull them to my office in small groups. I have a set of computers, and we do find some time and space for students to work with me. I mentioned earlier that is often not enough time to complete everything they need to do. So again, this is a space where it's a collaborative process where students get some work time with me, and I can help look things over and answer questions they have, and then they also will need to devote some time to work on this outside of school hours. And then finally, I do offer a financial aid workshop. This year I wasn't able to do it because it's sensitive information, and to do it virtually with tax documents and a big group of people did not feel comfortable. But I do believe we'll be able to go back to offering it next year. And usually sometime in the winter, I have trained volunteers who come in, and families can make an appointment to come in with their tax documents and sit down with someone who can actually walk them through the process of applying for financial aid. So families certainly don't need to utilize that support, but it is there for you. Applying to college and financial aid are two totally separate processes. I sort of look at them as being like, two arms on the same body, right? So like you need them both to come together for a student to make a decision about where to go. But the two processes are separate from each other. And as I mentioned, families are usually more involved in the financial aid component of it than they are in the college application component of it. So there will be a workshop to help support families with that next year. All right, so what can you as families do to support your student? Help with the completion and submission of forms to the college office. So when I send those out, if you guys can respond, it helps me to support your child. As I mentioned earlier, gather your financial documents and paperwork together, have them somewhere safe that you can access. If there's anything that you're missing, potentially trying to track it down now so that it's ready to go. I can provide a list of documents that you're going to need so that you know what to start gathering. Provide students with necessary information. They're going to wind up like calling you or talking to you and saying like, I need this, I need this, I need that. And so, just being available to sit down and have a conversation and give them the information that they need for their applications may seem like a small thing, but students that have sort of an open dialogue and are able to find time to talk with parents about things like that have an easier time applying. Working with students to complete financial aid applications. This is kind of a big one, just having conversations with students. I think sometimes students have like one plan in their head and parents have another idea in their head, and they're not always having conversations together about what they think the next path forward is, or sometimes there's some disagreement about what that should look like, and it can be a tough conversation to navigate. If a student is really intent on going away and a parent would like prefer them to stay home, that can be an uncomfortable conversation to have. But it's also important to have those conversations and be thinking as a family about what the next steps are going to look like. Help students get organized. We talked, I think, Jackie mentioned before, like working with them on some of those life skills now is also really helpful. Your student is going to be introduced to like a whole new language that they're not familiar with, especially if they're the ones who are leading the application process. There are just concepts that they haven't engaged in yet because they're not in the adult world, and they don't really understand tax documents necessarily, and they don't really understand certain aspects of a resume, or they maybe don't understand how to organize themselves around this, how to track passwords, how to find documents, how to send a professional email. So all those life skill pieces are places that parents can really help out. Wraparound support from home for the completion of assignments. So if you know that your student is working on college essay pieces, asking them about it or maybe taking a look at it together. I think when parents are in the know and are asking questions, it helps to hold students accountable for getting the work done. Visiting colleges together if possible, even virtually, sitting down together and looking at a school online and talking about it and talking about that experience can be really valuable. having a sense of deadlines and sort of acting as like a reminder for students. And then another big thing is when your student knows where they've been admitted and they have to decide where to go, decision-making support. First of all, the decision is often a family decision. And it's a big decision and it's a stressful decision. So just providing support and being a sounding board and having conversations about what makes sense. So these are like a lot of places that families can help support students. All right, I'm gonna actually just pause there. I'm gonna stop the share for a minute, see if there's any questions in the chat bar, and just invite any questions about what we've covered so far. Yeah, I will make all of the materials. So a student asked in the chat bar, can the slides be accessed? Yes, I will make all of the materials available. So the slides will be accessed. Someone asked about when students will get SAT results. So for students that took if we're talking about like the test day, I do believe that the results are actually back already. So basically what happens is students need to log into their College Board account. That's a personal account. It's not run through MELS. It's through the College Board. So students should have a username and a password that they created, and they will log on and they'll be able to find their scores there. I do also get scores, and then I upload them to a website called Naviance. Students hopefully know what Naviance is, but it's a database that we use at MELS, where students will eventually like request their transcripts and let me know which colleges they applied to. And SAT scores are also stored there. So if the student doesn't know how to get into their College Board account, they can log into Naviance and see their SAT scores that way. But for any students that don't remember username and password for College Board, you should reset that account because eventually you're going to need to get in through there. But the scores are available. So that's like a long-winded reply to just say, yes, students' scores are in and you have access to them. Students will be able to retest in June if they want to. There's an exam that's usually offered at the very end of August, and then students can also retest in the fall of their senior year. So October, November, and December, the SATs are offered. December is really the last date that a student can test before it's too late. And those scores, anything past December, the scores will not be back in time for college application. So the summer, if a student is really intent on testing again, can be a good time to prepare. They don't have all of the schoolwork that they have to do in addition to. So the summer can be a good time to prep to take the SATs again. But something for all of you to keep in mind is that testing optional is very much like alive and well for the class of 2022. And so for students who really feel unequipped to do well on the SATs for whatever reason or don't feel safe going into a testing site, can also opt not to test, and they would just apply and not submit test scores. So that is an option for students. Any other questions that I missed? If there's anything that you asked in the chat bar that I missed, feel free to let me know. Okay, so the COVID-19 questions, I do believe, or maybe this is like a hope on my part, but I do think it's going to be less impactful for the class of 2022. It really hit the class of 2020 and 2021 very hard. I'm hoping that we're going to see some of the impacts easing for the class of 2022. One of the things, though, that I have mentioned a couple of times is that this idea of being able to apply as a testing optional candidate has become much more widespread as a result of COVID, and it does look like colleges are going to continue in that trajectory, at least for this current class. For any parents of 10th graders, I really can't predict whether that's going to continue to be the case for the class of 2023, but it is true for the class of 2022 that I do expect that the vast majority of colleges will allow students to make that choice. I also want to acknowledge that it has impacted students' ability to engage in activities and might have impacted their resume. Obviously, lots of things shut down and programming has not been normal or typical. Students may not have been able to engage in things that they might have otherwise engaged in, but I also want to acknowledge that that's kind of like a nationwide or a worldwide phenomenon. So no one is alone in the fact that their resume and activities might look a little bit different than they would, had COVID not happened. Grades on the transcript might look different as well. Remote learning has been different. There will be an opportunity for students to explain any circumstances that they lived through as a result of COVID. So if it hit your family or your community particularly hard, if people experience the loss of jobs or the loss of family members, there's space in college applications for students to talk about it in greater depth, particularly if it negatively impacted them academically, to explain the circumstances of why that was. And so if it impacted students' grades, they will have a chance to talk more about that and why that is and explain their unique circumstances. Hopefully, when students in the class of 2022 and beyond attend college, it will be in person. I know that has been a big impact on current students, is making decisions about where to attend if campuses are closed and if students don't feel safe being on campus. But I hope that we see that as less of an impact for the students that are here today. Okay, so financial aid, because I know everyone is really curious about this. I'm not going to go into like super details about how to apply for financial aid. There'll be a lot of support for that next year. We do a financial aid night where someone comes and goes through the process of applying. Like I mentioned, we do a weekend workshop where people can come in and make appointments and get support applying. So you will have a lot of support next year. But the key pieces that I want you to be aware of are that college is affordable. When I say that, I don't mean that every single college is affordable. There are some very expensive colleges. There are some colleges that don't necessarily provide the most generous aid, but college can be affordable for every single person out there. And every year, our students who want to go have been able to find an affordable option. So I certainly want everyone to walk away feeling like college is accessible and can be affordable. Who has access to aid? So financial aid is available for any student that is a legal permanent resident or a citizen of the United States. And aid has actually recently become available to even students who do not have a social security number or do not have documentation. They can't access federal aid, but they can access state aid. And so this is just like a little nod to students who might not have a social security number. There are ways of accessing aid to help you afford college. And if you'd like to talk to me about that offline, I'm happy to share the resources that I know of. Financial aid forms, I think what I meant by this is just when I send the forms out, if you can fill them out and get them back to me, that will allow me to do my best job of supporting you and your student. There are some tools for parents to begin doing research. So often parents are interested in having their students apply for scholarships, in doing some predictive work around what kind of aid they might be eligible for. So the tools for that are scholarship databases where students can go and create an account. And then they can basically, it's almost like looking for a job. You sift through everything that's available. You look to see what you qualify for, and then you apply. And scholarship applications do often require students to submit something like an essay or a transcript or a letter of recommendation or all of those things. But students can begin the scholarship search now if they'd like. There's also a website called the FAFSA Forecaster. This is available on the website resource that I showed you earlier. But it's an opportunity for you to go in and put some basic information in about your household size and your annual income, and it will give you a sense of how much need-based aid you might be eligible for. And for students who are thinking about applying to private colleges, there's a tool called the College Board Net Price Calculator. It goes into greater depth than the FAFSA Forecaster, but it also will give you some insight into what kind of aid you might be eligible for. So if you have a student that's really excited about going to a particular private school and you want to find out whether it might be affordable for your family, the College Board Net Price Calculator is a great tool to use. And that specific website is also in the website's document that is available in the email that I sent out. But I will send it out again, and I will also make it available to students directly through their Google Classroom. Just a quick word about tax documents. Most of you have probably already filed 2020 taxes, but sometimes accountants give I don't know, just be careful about the advice that you get from your accountant, and that they are steering you in a direction that will make it easy to apply for financial aid. Sometimes there's a mismatch between what's in the tax documents and what the household situation looks like. And then when people go to file for aid, if those two things don't align, it can create complications. So I would have a conversation with your accountant about just making sure that the household situation, that's okay, my daughter came in, matches the tax documents. And as I mentioned before, there'll be a workshop for one-on-one support. Financial aid applications open on October 1st. So, and they're open all the way through June 30th. So there's quite a wide range of timeframes for parents and students to apply for financial aid. Financial aid applications, I usually recommend that you submit them at around the same time as college applications are due. So depending on how your student is applying, some college applications will be due in November. Those are called early applications, and some students will choose to submit early. If your student chooses to submit early, I would also do financial aid on the earlier side. January 1st is kind of a very typical college application deadline. And so for students that are doing regular decision deadlines, if you can get financial aid applications done by January 1st, that will put you in the best possible position. Different colleges have different deadlines. So a lot of knowing exactly when things have to happen stems from knowing where students are applying. And so often the first step in figuring out timeline is figuring out which colleges the student will be applying to. And then lastly, these are the 3 forms that I referenced earlier that I will ask families to complete. I'm going to send these out in the next day or two. Once I receive them back, I'll be able to begin scheduling students for individual advisement. That'll be a chance for me to get to know more about the student and the family in a one-on-one conversation, and start to make some recommendations about schools that could be a good fit for them, and maybe even hone in on what the timeline might be for that individual student. Okay, so that's everything I had prepared. I'm going to stop screen sharing, and I just want to open it up to questions. If you don't have questions, that's the end of the presentation, but I will hang around for a little while and answer questions that you do have. I'm going to go through the chat bar. Class of 2020 went through the worst. Well, I just talked to a student who's graduating from college right now, and that's pretty bad too. So, but I do agree. I feel for the class of 2020. It was not a fun year. All right, what other questions are in the chat bar? Okay. See, we're not ready for college quite yet. Okay, let's see. Yeah, they can hear me. Okay, let's see. No, don't do that, please. Will you be helping us fill out the CSS profile when applying for private colleges? The CSS profile is a special kind of financial aid application. So everybody is going to fill out the FAFSA, and most people are going to fill out the TAP, which is for state aid. Some people are going to fill out the CSS profile. And the CSS profile is specific to mainly private schools and also largely competitive private schools. It is way more in depth. It takes way more time. It's way more annoying. I'm just going to be honest about what the CSS profile requires. But also it is usually required by financially generous institutions. So it also helps to receive way more money. So it is worth doing. If a school requires it and it doesn't get filled out, then you won't be considered for the aid that that school has to offer. So if your child chooses to apply to a CSS profile requiring college, it will be mandatory. And I can provide support for that, but it gets way more personal. So I think it becomes a question of like, is that support that parents want? Do they want to share that kind of information with me? If so, I'm certainly happy to help. It is an important part of the process for some of our students. The other thing I just want to assure families is that all of this will make a lot more sense when you're like in the thick of going through it. So there's like a lot of information. I happen to know a lot of details just from having done it year after year, but you don't have to feel like you need to know all of it right now for your child to be successful when they apply. There'll be reminders and there'll be support at all the different stages. So I think the biggest thing is just like checking in, asking questions, always feel free to email me. It's a great way to get the conversation started. So if you have any questions, I'll put my email in the chat box, but please do feel free to reach out to me directly. And let's start getting to know each other better. Any remaining questions?
I was just wondering, like, how do we also submit like a college transcript or the transcript, like for the college now classes that we take? Are those also submitted into like a college application?
So that it depends. They'll ask you in the applications if you took any college classes, and you'll have the opportunity to report it. And then if you want to send your transcript so that they have like an official copy of it, you'll actually have to request that through Queens College, because it's not the MELS transcript, it's the Queens College transcript that will go to them.
Okay, thank you.
And then the College Board account is not automatically created for students. Students need to create one for themselves. So if you don't have one, you can go and create a new account. And if you do have one but you don't remember it, you can go through the process of resetting it. I'm not even sure if the student can ask that question. I don't think so. All right. Bye, Jeff. Is anyone else hanging out because they're hoping to ask a question? I'll stick around for a few more minutes. Or if anyone has like an individual or a personal question that they don't want to ask in this forum, feel free to email me and we can set up a time to speak one-on-one.